What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Hawks Film Room podcast. Make sure that you like, subscribe, add the show wherever you listen. Definitely appreciate that. Hawks got another win, back-to-back wins on the second night of a back-to-back with travel. Very short-handed, down three starters plus DeAndre Hunter. They beat the Bulls. It's the first time all season the Hawks held an opponent under 100 points. So things we're going to talk through with the one and only Pablo Escobar. Uh, how you doing today, my guy? After the Daeqwon Plowden and Keaton Wallace masterclass.
Well, it's always a horrible day when I have to watch Bulls basketball. I've been on a boycott, but I've come out of retirement for this extra special episode. So everybody,
I
soak
appreciate
it
that.
in. This is the last time I'm talking about the Bulls until there's action, until there's trades. I will not speak about this horrible team. We got What would you describe this Hawks team as? Is this your C team? Is this your D
Yo,
team?
we had 10 guys active, and we're missing six rotational players. Now, Larry Nance and Kobe Buffkin, they've been out for a good amount of time, but six rotational players, three starters, plus the six man of the year candidate, DeAndre Hunter. I mean, there's bad losses. Teams are, they always say the NBA, like, a team can win at any time, but this is a bad. Like, if I was, again, you guys have AK as a GM, so we know he's just going to sit back and act like everything's okay. If I was a GM, I'd be making calls starting right now if I lost. So
And
it's rough.
if you didn't make calls, a normal owner would fire you. They'd be upset and say, "Hey, this has been a disaster for years straight." But that's not how things
Yep.
work. How things work in Chicago is we got our winning out of the way in the '90s. Now it's all about a bag. As long as the audience is full, we're okay. Nothing else matters.
Yeah, I think I heard a couple boos on the broadcast, but I think you guys have consistently been among the league leaders in attendance, right? Like people are still going to the games. Like they're not. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know why. I guess, and it's not even like the stadium is like right in downtown Chicago or something, or like it's kind of in a rough area of the city, and so you
Mm.
kind of have to go out of your way to go there. So it's not as if people are just like on vacation. They're like, hey, let me stop by. Well, I guess they could kind of do that, but yeah, I don't know who's going. If it's like lifelong fans or if it's just people who maybe like the Kim Jong Uns who were big time '90s Bulls fans and they just want to experience it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the gifts and the curse of being a historic franchise. Like I think the Lakers were content with being mediocre for a long time for the same reason, where it's like we're gonna make money regardless. Uh, I definitely do want to see some trades because there's still some gems on this team. Like Zach LaVine has gotten a lot of slander for his contract value, but he's had a phenomenal season. Like I think he was coming off what 6 or 7 straight games of 30 plus points, and then he ended up with like 25 last night. So I do want to start highlighting some players from tonight. Now I don't blame you at all if you don't want to highlight a single Chicago Bull. We could talk all Hawks players if you'd like, but I think I'm gonna have to go ahead and start with Keaton Wallace, man. I mean, they're just he's the easy choice. He put up 18 shots, led the Hawks in shot attempts, points, had 6 rebounds, 6 assists, 4 steals. This is Keaton Wallace's brother, for people who may not know, and it's really funny because they kind of play defense the same way. They have the same defensive stance. And I really was excited when he started playing for us because I thought he could just be, someone who could come in and step in for a couple minutes at a time. Like I never really expected him to be able to scale up this way. But the shooting has been legit all season. He has a nice left-handed stroke. He's pretty solid at defensively, like just like his brother. What was really interesting though, like certain teams have forced him into a ton of turnovers. We'll talk a little bit about how Chicago doesn't do that to anybody. But for a Hawks team that didn't have reliable ball handlers, they were able to pretty much get wherever they wanted. So definitely have to give Keaton his flowers. And yeah, what did you think about his performance? And if you feel so inclined, highlight a bull after you get that response.
Yeah, he was incredible all night. He was splashing threes. He was doing everything. Um, and yeah, he's older than Kaysen, right?
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty sure.
So, yeah, it was just like I I was aware of him as an NBA player, but I can't say I had ever seen him play like extended minutes or anything. So I was just like the
Yeah.
whole time, of course, we're getting killed by this guy. The uh, the only bowl I think I would highlight out of this game would be Buzelis, just by virtue of being a young guy who who's getting more run, I guess, recently. I haven't checked his minutes to see if there's been like a trend or an uptick or anything, but
Different.
it's just this is such a stale roster full of guys who have been the same for years, and there's nothing new except, I mean, Kobe White's cool, but still.
Yeah.
Booz Ellis is just like a nice little injection of athleticism and like pace and stuff. He's flying around on both ends. He tries to dunk everything, and so
Yep.
he's a cool guy to watch. He's a very confident player. So I'd say that's my lone little bright spot from watching this team.
Yeah, I love Buse Ellis. He was someone that I was really high on pre-draft, and it's kind of hurt my heart a little bit to see him not get a ton of consistent run in Chicago. I thought it was really cool that he was going to a hometown team, but I think in the minutes that I have seen, I mean, I'm just encouraged. Like, obviously, he isn't doing a lot because he just hasn't had a ton of opportunity, but I'm not sure where his like high end outcome ends up at some point. But I think he's at the very least like a really intriguing player, and I like that he can do multiple things, has size, length, all that. I thought that was definitely a difference maker in some aspects in some matchups. Um, so from my perspective, I think a bull I'd want to talk about. I think Julian Phillips was kind of just like he was all right. You know, he didn't kill you guys. Was active on the offensive glass. I liked his activity in general. Um, Josh Giddey was really bad, so I think anytime someone was on the floor for Josh Giddey, I was just okay. I like these minutes a lot better. I think it's funny because it's good for once for the Hawks fans to be on the side where it's like, okay, this guy's killing us because for us, it feels like every random role player has been killing us for years. Some of that's a defense, like we're just not good at adjusting within the flow of the game. But for me personally, I have a vendetta against Javon Carter. So to see him get 4 minutes and go 0 for 2, and I was a little bit happy with that. I do think he takes it personally when he gets to go get straight. We saw what he did last time against the Hawks. This time he didn't get as much burn. He wasn't as effective. So I do think from a hating perspective, I was happy with that outcome. But is there a Hawk that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, I mean the next one's got to be obvious too. It's got to be Daeqwon Plowden, who I got to admit I'm a draft guy too. I've never heard of this guy. Were you aware of this guy? Did you watch him
I
at
had no
Bowling
idea
Green
who
or
he
anything?
was. I had no idea who he was. No.
Yeah, they're like Daeqwon Plowden, first ever NBA game on the broadcast, and I was like, oh great, this kind of game where we're getting the G League guys I've literally never heard of. They're getting
Yep.
run, and then he started popping off. He finished the game 7 for 8, 5 of 6 from three. He's another guy who's flying around, and he was like, I checked his college stats, like his senior year wasn't even that good statistically in college, and it was back in like 2021, I think. So it was just like, yeah, it's I I would like to be optimistic and be like, yes, the Hawks found a nice little gem here, but I can't help but just look at it from the pessimistic Bulls side and be like, this is probably going to be one of the few games of this guy's career that he goes crazy, and it's against this disastrous defense. What a game.
Yeah, he's been a legitimate guy in the G League. But if you're gonna be an NBA player, you have to dominate at the G League level for the most part. So I think he's been good enough for us to give him a two-way contract. So our previous second round pick, Seth Lundy, he was the guy who had that contract. He had an ankle injury, we waived him and then signed Daeqwon. And he has a lot of athleticism. He's good size for he's about 6'6". Um, really good shooting stroke too. Like he's shot above 40% on good volume in college parts. So uh, at the very least, like I think what I really loved about this Hawks team as of late, during like the COVID years, we were playing guys like Jarrett Culver, Sean D. Brown, dudes who are just like not NBA players by any stretch of the imagination. But now they have like this in-house development system that's paid dividends. Like you're gonna get some streaky games like this. That's nice. I'm not saying he'll always be able to like produce this type of level of production, but there's a lot of examples that of the Skyhawks and the G League being very helpful for the Hawks. So Jalen Johnson was a guy who spent a lot of time in the G League. Kobe Buffkin spent time in the G League. He looked good before he got hurt. Dominic Barlow, Nikola Jurisic, and then those two
Oh
guys,
yeah, what's
Mohamed
going
Gay.
on
Like,
with him?
yeah. So the thing about Jurisic too, he had a pretty like wicked knee injury in summer league,
Oh
and
really?
so the Hawks didn't sign him to a contract. And so he did
Oh,
all his
at all?
rehab technically away from the team. Like he wasn't on the roster, and then they signed him to the Skyhawks roster. So there was some speculation whether he would go back overseas. Uh, but he's within our system now, and he's actually had like a really good game. I was watching one of the Hawks senior reporters did a thread on it where he's always made ridiculous passes, but now he's figuring out defensively. And so if with his size and what he can do with the ball in his hands, he could be a legitimate guy for us, especially because we traded for him before AJ became a pastor. So like a great move, but if he turns out to be a legitimate guy, then that's like a huge value add for the Hawks. But I think the Skyhawks in general, that system has been really beneficial for us. And Plowden, you need guys who can step up from time to time. Like the Hawks have had bad injury luck, and now we're actually playing legitimate NBA caliber guys as opposed to like Kevin Knox, which respectfully, like I think it's a pretty good difference. And the fact they've been within the system already also makes it a little bit more portable from level to level. So I think I was shocked. I sent you on Twitter. I was like, yeah, if I was going to expect anyone to go off, it would be a Bogey, it'd be a Dyson Daniels. But the Hawks won this game despite Bogey going 1 for 9 from 3 and Garrison Matthews 0 for 6. So like that's pretty much unheard of and not something I would think would be possible. So big props to those two guys on the two ways. I want to talk to you about the turnovers. So Chicago, I know you said you haven't really been tapped in as much. I don't know how much of an impact, not exactly me, but Lonzo has on this in terms of like ball security, like getting guys better shots. You guys had 20 turnovers tonight. The Hawks were at plus 12 in points off turnovers. Like right now, you guys are like league average in turnover percentage, but you're 30th in forcing opponent turnovers. So just 11% of our opponent's possessions results in a turnover, and you also have the lowest deflection percentage in the league. So when you like, what have you seen from Lonzo since he's came back? What does he do for ball security, and what do you think? Why do you think you guys are so frugal, or I guess like so careless with the ball tonight?
Yeah, I think Lonzo, just by virtue of him being out there more, you're going to cut down on turnovers because when he's on ball, obviously the on ball scoring is a concern for him as like a viable point guard in the half court. But
Mm-hmm.
even the issue there is putting pressure. It's never like turnover mistakes. He's never like trying to force anything crazy. And then really just his presence as a connector out there is big time too. Like he's just a really great role player who keeps things running. As far as the overall turnovers, yeah, it's funny on the Bulls broadcast tonight. They were like, yeah, these I don't know what's happening because there were like 5 turnovers right away to start the game, and the Bulls
Yep.
broadcasters were like, the Hawks aren't really doing anything. We're
Yep.
just making mistakes, and so
Yeah.
yeah, it's really just a product. I feel like of having a bad team out there. I want to say, but also I suppose maybe could you apply it to the pace? I know where both of these teams are two of the fastest teams
Uh-huh.
in the NBA, and they just try and cover up for a lot of offensive flaws by running up and down. And so
Yep. Yep.
that could be one explanation, but also yeah, like Zach LaVine has historically been a pretty turnover prone guy, and overall this team isn't full of the best decision makers in the world and stuff like that. So yeah, it's not the biggest surprise.
I think your point about pace is a good point and probably a big reason why. And I do want to point like a distinction between the Hawks playing with pace and the Bulls playing with pace. So outside of Zach LaVine, Julian Phillips, Modest, like there's not a lot of big open court athletes on this Bulls team. So open court. Kobe White can get above the rim at times, but it's not as effective, and it's also not. You're also not creating turnovers on the other end. So when you're turning the ball over at a high rate because you're getting a lot of possessions, you're not making back up for it on the other end. And like you said, there were a lot of unforced turnovers with Chicago. I mean, Atlanta even threw the ball off of Dyson's head, and then Zach, like it was some goofy basketball for like at some points. But when you do have a Dyson Daniels and he can make plays like these, it just adds a lot of value because this is either going to be a layup or it's going to be a kick out. It looks like he wanted to kick it out to the
Yeah.
corner, and Dyson's able to knock it off his hand. So I think and I can't remember what team I was talking. I think it was the Raptors. We played the Raptors in a similar thing where like Toronto was just completely out of sorts offensively, and not a lot of it wasn't what Atlanta was doing, but I do think it's sort of like I think from a mindset perspective, maybe teams are like, oh, we got to play fast tonight, and and then maybe they get a little bit in sort of like inside their head a little bit where they're trying to think a little bit too quickly. Like we saw 2 Bulls step out of bounds on plays like these. It's a lot of unforced stuff. But like I said, when you can generate those turnovers, you can afford to play at a higher pace. Like I think that's what Toronto has done in years. Golden State has done that. But when you're not and you're more stagnant offensively, it can be a little bit tougher. So I think your point about Lonzo is interesting too. And I was curious, like, what have you thought about him since he's returned? Because I haven't had a chance to watch like a full game within context, but from the clips I've seen, like he looks like he's moving well. I'm just really happy for him in general. But like, what have you seen from him since he's came back?
Yeah, the most definitely the most surprising part is that he's still a plus defensive player. He's still making a lot of the same
Sure.
plays he used to on the defensive end, which that's been like when you suffer those catastrophic knee injuries, usually like the defense is the first thing to go. Like no
Yep.
like you could realistically reclaim yourself. Like a guy like Lonzo Ball especially like it's you it would be fine to have optimism that he could get back to being like a big time catch and shoot offensive player. The passing's not really going to go anywhere, especially because like I said earlier, he's a guy who passes despite not being like on ball advantage creator. Like he
Mhm.
finds other ways to do it. So that's not really going to leave him. But the big concern is this guy is an unbelievable wing defender. But what does he look like without that? But so far in the games that he has played, he's still disrupting things. I don't know. I should probably pull up his stats and see if there's any change. But in terms of defensive playmaking, he's still making life hard on opposing offenses. So that's been a really welcome surprise for him.
Yeah, I think you're seeing his minutes played ticking up game by game as well. And I'm curious, like, do you think he has enough like in the tank to help like a team, like in terms of like really carving out a role for like a contender? Like, do you think you could see a team wanting to trade for him? Because I know we're not a contender by any means, but a lot of Hawks fans are looking
Mm-hmm.
for backup point guards. I personally don't feel like it's as big of an issue. I believe Latin Kobe Buffkin, like this, neither here or there. But Lonzo's name has come up a lot because of what he's been doing for Chicago, and then just like his appeal as a guy who can somewhat mirror Trey's ability to play fast, but still be a
Mm-hmm.
positive defensive player. So, like, what do you think about his overall ability to contribute to a team? Do you think he could work for a team like the Hawks, or do you think he'd be best suited in like a more, I guess, like more competitive environment where he can get like for example, I was thinking like maybe Orlando could be pretty cool, or like a team that has some higher like playoff aspirations.
Yeah, and so I'm looking at his steal rate right now. It's 3.4 and block rate
Yeah.
2.5. So yeah, he's making things happen in the minutes he's playing. Um, but yeah, he's a very interesting trade bet because I feel um I think I think he's a good player for sure. Like this shot, I think what is he at? Like 34% right now. So it's not where it was, but still, I feel
Good.
like he's just still a straight up good player. The only concern would be the durability. Like is this guy
Yeah.
actually going to hold up over the course of a playoff series or anything? I don't know what the medical plan is exactly. Like is he just not going to play every other game for the rest of the year or whatever? But the other interesting part is he's an expiring contract, I believe, like 21 million.
Oh
So
wow.
he's an interesting bet in that aspect. Let me pull up exactly what the number is. But so I haven't heard any smoke about like teams that have been looking at him as like an interesting trade target. So $21 million expiring contract. So I think he would be a cool bet for a lot of teams where it's just like, hey, let's go in on this guy. The only downside is the health. The upside is he's a really good player, a really smart player who, when healthy, could play like legit minutes in the playoffs. And
Yeah.
then worst case scenario, he's just off the books and you clear 21 million. So who would the Hawks have to give up to match the contract? Do you think?
Contract wise, I wonder if you could do something with a Larry Nance, maybe. Um, I don't
I'm
really
gonna
know what
pull up the
Chicago wants.
Fanspo trade machine.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing too. I feel like they probably don't want to give up much equity. I think you guys in particular are looking for a little bit more young talent. Maybe we don't have a ton of tradable contracts. That's the thing. Like I don't think a quick Capella makes sense. I want to do a DeAndre Hunter, even though they make about the same amount of money. I think it'll probably have to come down to like a Larry Nance plus stuff. So maybe
Yeah.
it wouldn't be. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how you'd make it work, but especially like just because I don't know what you guys want. I've
Yeah,
always loved Lonzo, but I'm not.
that's the biggest problem with any Bulls trade is no one knows what we want at all because we are run by a psychotic person. If I was running the team, I'm giving up Lonzo for anything because
Really.
like he's expiring, and so I don't know if we're gonna re-sign him. I don't know if we even know. And in my ideal world, we're tanking for years to come. So I'm not really looking to re-sign him for the future. So I'd be okay just matching salaries and getting like even a second round pick. If you could get a first, that'd be a dream, but probably not
Yeah.
just based off the durability. But if I could get like a second or two second rounders, I'm pulling the trigger. But
Yeah.
I'm just in that I'm in full on tank mode. I don't want any positive assets in return for Levine for Vucevic. I just want everyone off the books, and I wanna fight for our pick. We are the ninth. We have the ninth pick right now. If we finish outside the top 10, the Spurs keep it. So we need that is ultimate disaster scenario. So we need to
Yeah.
rack up some L's as soon as possible. And so if yeah, let's do a coup. I'll give I'll give Lonzo Ball to the Hawks for nothing. But as far as our GM goes, it's really he's psychotic. There's no way to know
Sure.
what he wants.
Yeah, I definitely do want to ask you a little bit about like where you'd want to take this team because one thing that I noticed just from watching tonight, offensively at least, we talk a little bit about like the lack of physicality or like effort, um, especially when we talk about the offensive rebounds. I'll pull up that sequence that where Dyson got his own offensive rebound off a free throw and made it. But I thought one thing that's pretty interesting about this Bulls team, right? You guys are seventh in drives per game, so typically getting downhill a little bit. Seventh in drive assists, but just 17.8% of those assists are coming off of drives. Of their total assists are coming off of drives, which is 12. And so my initial thought is like a lot of this is because this is the second highest transition frequency offense in the league. So a lot of these like kick out passes, it's not necessarily coming like in the half court scenario. Um, but when I watched tonight, it feels like there's not a ton of like drive and kick actually being done. Like it's a drive to score. And I think with guys like Giddy's probably like the best at it on the team, but you have a lot more like Kobe and Zach are more scoring lean. But the other thing that's interesting is that this offense is not like very screen heavy. So only Memphis has less actions off of screens, 27th in off ball screen actions, 28th in handoff, and 28th in cuts. So it's driving, but it's a lot stagnant movement. So it's not like, okay, I'm going to drive and then this guy's going to sink down to the corner to the dunker spot or this guy's going to run off a screen while I'm driving. A lot of it just felt stagnant. And so um, what I saw from what the Hawks had some success with doing was running guys off the 3-point line and then forcing them into taking shots off the dribble. And I thought that made a pretty big difference for because you got to shoot the three ball really well. I didn't realize how good of a 3-point shooting team this was, but they were like I think you're first in open 3-point attempt rate, third in like 3-point percentage, like pretty good. But what the Hawks did is they were running guys off the line, and now you have Patrick Williams trying to shoot off the dribble, and that you'll take that all the time over a catch and shoot. So with those things in mind, where it's like these, it's not a lot of off-ball movement. Some more like you're relying on the stagnant creation. Like, what do you want to see from this team? Like, if you could build them around like a type of offensive philosophy that's a little bit less predictable, a little bit harder to defend. Like, what would you want guys to be able to do? Like, what type of offensive players are you looking for? Just kind of curious, like your thoughts on the offense in general.
So in order to maximize this current core, honestly, I don't know. I don't think there's there's a solution out there because
Yeah.
like Zach Levine is by far the most viable like half court scorer on the team, but he's not a great decision maker and he's not a guy you want to put like we for many years we played that way. It was like Zach Levine save us basketball. When
Right.
he's the primary decision maker, he's just not that good. Like a pick and roll operator, he leans really heavily towards the roll man. Like there's not a lot of vision to the corners and what else is going out on the court. So
Mhm.
that's a problem. It is I do like his best moment. He's like hyper efficient this year though, and that has come playing off the ball. And like they do a lot where they use Vucevic as a hub, and Zach will just like run off that and stuff like that. And he's had success doing that off of like Thaddeus Young as well. But yeah, it's just overall that combo's not going to work. Josh Giddey is a huge problem because the guy is out there for his passing ability, but if you can only pass, if that's the only skill you have, can't be an on-ball creator in the half court, can't be a viable one.
Yeah.
And then yeah, it's just like the he can't score. So they'll ignore him when he's off the ball. When he's on the ball, he's easy to deal with. Patrick Williams is having a rancid month offensively, and he's just very timid as an on ball creator himself. And so overall, like really, maybe I would just go full on Kobe White ball and just just do like Damian Lillard style, just Kobe White run a million ball screens, just pull up, take 10 pull up threes from the logo or something to try and make this work. But and he's a really fast guy, even though he's not a traditional like half court rim, a
Yeah.
super great traditional half court rim pressure guy either. But I probably that would probably be the path, and he's the one of the few guys I would want to stick around beyond this iteration of the roster, and so maybe just maximizing those reps for him would be good because he is a guy who came into the league with passing concerns, but starting last year he really took a leap in terms of
Yeah.
making those reads. Um, but then again, as I'm talking through it, like it's hard to run that constant high pick and roll when you have to share the court with Josh Gideon. Guys can just leave him in the corner and take away everything else that way. So, yeah, that would be my path, but there is no path. Every path leads you off a bridge.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think something that I wanted to point out in terms of like a difference between these teams, I didn't really feel like I saw like anyone on the Bulls do anything like similar to this, but um one thing that I really like about what the Hawks have been doing this year is just attacking the rim a ton more. And so it's been Reed Krejci, it's been Dyson Daniels, not guys that aren't necessarily like huge offensive threats, but when they have opportunities, they're just trying to attack it. They've been able to force these contacts and they were able to get to the line. Like I said, the Hawks are a plus 12 in free throw attempts. They've also increased their free throw rate. They're 10th in the league. They have never really been that high in the Trae Young era, even though Trae is a really good guy. He's really good at drawing his own fouls. Like they haven't had anyone else to put pressure on the rim. And so that I think that's been a big difference maker for us. I just think like Chicago needs some more guys who just kind of like get out and run. I don't really like, if the style is to play like high pace, then I think that's something that to commit to. And I think what the best teams in the NBA are able to like get out and transition. Um, but I do want to ask you a little bit about you mentioned something about Vucevic playing as a hub. I think Onyeka had a great game, like holistically, but as a passer too, he had 7 assists, which is his career high. And this is after he had a career high in rebounds last night. And so here he was operating as like the hub at the top of the key, dribbles towards Bogey, decides to flip it to the other way. Dyson reads it, and he gets a step on Javon, and it's a foul and one. So like I guess in general, like where are you at with Onyeka right now? Would you like him? Did you like anything you saw from him tonight? And like what do you think about him potentially being that type of like hub type of guy?
Yeah, I like him. When I checked in on him a little earlier in the season, I honestly was a little bit disappointed, but mostly based off my
Yeah.
prior like draft evaluation because I thought this guy could be like the starting center of the future. But when I locked in a little bit earlier, I was like, ooh, I don't know, a little bit small, and you notice it more. And I felt like he wasn't getting a chance to pass a lot, to flex that like feel and passing ability. But tonight he was like you showed the hub stuff, and yeah, I think he's pretty good. I still don't know if he's like future starting center for this team, but he's the type of guy who unfortunately can take advantage of someone like Vucevic. Like the size difference, you would think you would feel it more with a 7-footer versus a 6'9" guy, but you don't all night because that's just the nature. See, that's great stuff. I
Yeah.
love that.
He was really diving up cutters. He was hitting guys on backdoor cuts. It was really good. Just a great offensive game for him. And I think the size thing is interesting because he's shown that he can play bigger than his size. Like there's a lot of clips about like him going up against Giannis, guys like that, Joel Embiid holding his own. But sometimes I think it's not really the defensive stuff. It's really on the offensive side where he doesn't finish above the rim or he doesn't finish through guys. He has great touch around the rim, but he's not like I'm gonna catch it and I'm gonna pound it. I'm gonna try and like go up and dunk it. And I think Again, for a Hawks team that has a lack of size, like you kind of can't afford that.
Mhm.
So it will be interesting. I still wanted to get a 7-footer, but I've been a little bit higher on him than most Hawks fans. I really like the way that he can flash this field. Like this is a really good just read of floor balance here. So just get it back to Dyson when the paint was wide open. He knows that Vucevic, who's like the rim protector, but he's just the big dude on the floor. Uh, Uzelis has his back to the ball, and there's no one in any sort of position to help. And I just thought it was really clean from him. I think, and the other thing is too, like he had some that didn't end up connecting. Like he probably could have finished with 10 assists. This was another beautiful one that led to a dunk, and that's like a huge benefit about having a center who can pass. Is just, of course, he brings the center out to take it away from the rim, and the Hawks, like especially for Trae Young, who doesn't really have the length or the athleticism or the verticality to finish around bigger guys. I think playing with a center who can pass could do so much for him and his game. Because even if it isn't Onyeka passing him open, then it's like, okay, we have to respect this guy as a shooter, a passer, a dribble handoff guy. We have to pull the center away. And the past couple of seasons, I've seen these graphics where it's like the Hawks haven't been able to pull other rim protectors away from the basket. But these are the types of passes and playmaking that can pull other centers away. And so that's why I think he's just so valuable, and the offense always just flows better with him on the floor. Um, but there's still some things that I think he has to prove to Quinn Snyder to say, okay, this is the guy that we can consistently like play for 30, 35 minutes a night. I don't think it's anything bad, like in terms of having a tandem. Like, I mean, Clint is Clint Capella. Like he took 4 hook shots and I wanted to kill him. But at the same time, he's a decent rebounder, decent rim protector. So I want us to shake it up. I really liked what I've seen from Onyeka so far. I liked it. So I guess like when you saw him in college, you thought he could be a starting center. Do you think the size was just less of a concern in college, or do you think that within the context of the Hawks, the size is a bigger concern than you expect?
So what draft was he? Was he 2020 or was
He
he
was
21?
2019. No, he's 20.
Oh, he's
Wait, no, he was Anthony Edwards' year, so he's 2020.
okay, yeah. You know what I feel like it may have been? I feel like I might have just been higher on smaller centers back then, just in general. And I really did buy into the idea like next Bam. Like this guy, there's
Yeah,
no real physical limitation to where like he can't do what Bam was doing. Oh, and that's probably Bam was going on the finals run, right? So
yeah, yeah. Makes sense.
so yeah, I was probably like, hey, he could get up there and block Jason Tatum too. So that was probably my thought process. And um yeah, I just thought he would be a guy who could protect the rim at a high level and switch at a high level. And I still feel pretty good about his switching ability. How has he held up this year on that end in general?
He's been good switching, but the defensive numbers haven't been as great as they have been in the past, and I think
Mm-hmm.
they're asking him to do a little bit different things than what he typically would, and but we've seen a little bit of a fall off in terms of the his impact at the rim as a defender, where years prior he was opponents were shooting like 6 percentage points worse with him contesting. This year it's just 0.9%, and he's also contesting the lowest shots per 100 in his career. So he's not around the rim as much, which I think is pretty interesting because one thing that I kind of expected to see with adding Dyson and Reza Shea was, okay, we can keep the centers at home more. But I think they've actually been a little bit more out of place than I would expect. Maybe that's because they're getting up and down quicker. Maybe that's because they're asking him to do more switching, whatever it may be. But I think his versatility is still such an asset, whether the rim protection numbers aren't showing up as well. But that also may just be Clint Capella's having a better year protecting the rim, or lineups without Onyeka protecting the rim a little bit better because this year Clint is really hooping on that end. Like teams are shooting 9 percentage points worse with him on the floor, um, and he's contesting again like the lowest shots at the rim of his career, which I do think the Hawks in general have stopped allowing that. They're just not bleeding points in the paint as much anymore from a defensive scheme wise. Like they allow the lowest points per possession to pick and roll men, like the actual roller, because they aggressively help in those scenarios. They aggressively send help to prevent those types of layups. So I do think the scheme is sort of impacting those numbers. I think Onyeka is still a more versatile defender. I think he's more of a futuristic center, but they do need to figure that out long term. Um, I wanted to show you one more clip, and this is the the offensive rebound that Dyson gets off his own free throw miss. I don't know if I've ever seen a team do this. And what I love about this is you see both Vooch and Kobe like throw their arms out like what are we supposed to do? And they just freeze. Uh, I, I was just like lost for words. So I'm like, I think that first half from the Bulls was like really really bad from an effort perspective. And I know it's the second night of a back to back. But do you think effort is coachable? Do you think this team is just like tired of playing the same type of basketball? Like what do you think this is? And is this like like do you think this is something that sticks with the team, or like do you think it's just like these group of guys are just like not very high effort, high energy?
I think for definitely a lot of them, it is just a straight up personnel issue. Like this is just not a roster tailored to high motor defensive guys. But also they have to be feeling what I'm feeling and what most
Yeah,
of like the Bulls fan base is like. We know
yeah,
we're going nowhere. If the entire last 3 years we've had the same group or whatever, and it's just been 500 basketball the entire time, and we haven't made we're all the same guys. We have all the same problems every year. There's got to
yeah,
be like a lack of buy-in. It's got to be stale for them as well, and so I think that's got to be a factor for why that. Yeah, like that. I think everyone needs a change of scenery. Really, everyone needs a vibe shift.
yeah. That's what I was kind of worried about with the Hawks for a minute as well. Where it's like, I think the like honestly, we're closer in terms of like results, end the season results, than like most Hawks fans would want to admit. We've both been around that playing range, 40 to
Mm-hmm.
44 ish wins. It could be, I can imagine like it could be demoralizing, especially like if it's the same type of basketball being played, the same type of losses, the same type of like lack of growth. And I think for the Hawks, at least they can see the growth with Jalen Johnson. They can see the growth with
Yeah.
adding Dyson Daniels, Regis Shea. Like there's a glimpse of the future. But for Chicago, it's like, okay, well, Kobe White's pretty good. And
Yeah,
that's it.
we don't have the same ceiling guys. Like even Trey with all his issues, like when he's
Mhm.
playing his best basketball, this is an offensive engine who dropped 40 in the conference finals against the Bucks defense or whatever. And so even when you're trying to work out everything, you have that glimpse in your mind. You have the Jalen Johnson on the
Right.
rise, big wing coming up. You have I don't know what are Hawks fans still optimistic about Rizzo. I wasn't the biggest Rizzo guy, but I could see how that could inject like optimism into a fan base. Be like,
Yeah.
we just got the number one pick. But the Bulls, there's none of that. Like I don't think there's any Zach LaVine truthers out there that are like he could be the guy if he just got healthy.
Hmm.
It's just everyone feels the doom and everyone knows that there's no savior on this roster, and the only savior that's going to come is through the draft, and we don't know when we're going to really bottom out to get that guy.
Good. Yeah, I think Regis Shea has been I guess like from my perspective, I never really expected like a ton from him. And that's not
Mm.
to say he's a bad player. That's not to say I didn't think he can't be great. It's just more so from what I saw pre-draft and then what we'd be asking him to do. We don't need him to go out there and, be a huge offensive impact guy, but shooting has been tough. I can't deny that. But I've loved what I've seen from him defensively. Like
What is he at on the year?
man, it's bad. Last time I checked, he was like 28% from three. Um,
Oh,
he's yeah, he's at 28% on around like 8 3-point attempts per 100, and his true shooting percentage is at 48%. So that's the 11th percentile, and he's 8 percentage points worse than league average. So not good. Um,
it's not
and
canon until year 3. That's my policy though. So
yes, yes, yes.
I'm not out on Scoot Henderson either yet.
Oh yeah, yeah. Me too. And I think it's just unfortunate because it's like Um, his shot is butter. Like I think like when I see it, like I don't think he'll be this bad of a shooter. And I was kind of looking at guys who had started off as badly and what their like career 3-point percentages look like, and generally like all those guys improved. So I do think to some measure like he'll be all right. It's just about like how much better will he be is really the question. Because like I'll just pull up the graphic real quick before we finish with a couple of like more like bigger NBA questions. But like this is the group of like biggest improvements. So Like Gary Harris was garbage from three his rookie year. Now he's a 37% shooter. Jalen Suggs, KD, Chris Paul, all these guys are really bad in their rookie year. Um, but one of the indicators that they would be a better 3-point shooter is that their relative true shooting percentage was like not abysmal for a rookie. Like a -3 for Baron Davis, a -1.4, like a +1.4 for Chris Paul. Those are all respectable, especially for the type of shots these guys are taking. And so that's where the concern comes in for someone like Regis Shea, because it's like, I mean, -8 is bad. Like that's bad. Like that's some of like the worst in the league. And again, like all these guys improve. Like you can see that this is the difference between their career 3-point percentage and their rookie season. Only Stanley Johnson and Dennis Smith Jr. did not get better from their actual rookie season. So I do think, hopefully, like he gets more of a higher end result. But like at the end of if he can get to a 35, 36, still be a great defender, make these good connective passes, like that's not the greatest outcome at one, but it's not a massive garbage pile failure. And I think with the way the rest of the class is, like if the rest of the class was dominating, oh, we'd be in trouble. Like, but everyone else has kind of been mid at best, if not, completely stinky. So I think like Jalen Wells, Zach Edey, they're hooping, but they're not like someone you'd ever take number one. Stephon Castle, like I think they probably knew they was gonna get Dyson, so they didn't take him. He has this question mark as a shooter as well. Alex Sarr is probably like he was my guy. He's playing better basketball as of late, but he's still
Yeah.
below 52 shooting percentage as a center. So it's like, luckily the comp is bad too, but I do think he has to become a good shooter at some point. I think he will be. Question is when and how much, and you can't really predict that. So,
Yeah, in France, he was a little streaky. Like, I think it was it the first half of the season, or maybe it was the opposite. But he was like on fire. I think he was on fire
it
the
was the
first half,
beginning.
and
Yeah,
he couldn't make anything the second half, and then he
yeah.
kind of rebounded in the playoffs. And so there were some people who were skeptical about it, but I'm optimistic just based off the types of shots that he was making. Like he was running off movement and sinking them, and
Yeah.
so I think he's okay, and his volume is decent, like 4 per game. So I'm optimistic, and I think how has his defense looked overall? Because
No,
that's
the defense is legit. It's definitely
yeah,
legit. He was battling with KD like the first. Now, mind you, that's Kevin Durant. So third quarter, Kevin Durant was he didn't miss. I think I'm pretty sure he went 7 of 8 on all mid range bad work. Called Regis J on a couple BS fouls, but he's matching the physicality. He's not getting bumped off his spots. He's getting a hand in KD's face. And so I think that was all super encouraging. Like results be damned. Like you're not going to stop Kevin Durant, but if you can hold up physically and like make him work, that's all I'm asking
mhm.
for. So I've loved his defense. At some point, he was like one of the few teenage wings who have ever been above league average in defensive estimated plus minus. I haven't checked that in a while because like our defense has fluctuated, so he may not be there anymore. But for his age, his frame, the defense is definitely good, better than advertised. I think the weak side stuff and like the off ball stuff can be better. But he has like flash, like flying to the rim, like stopping guys before they get there. So, I think he has a pretty decent floor, and for some people I've spoken to, like who understand like the path they had for him pre-draft, this is basically like the way they evaluated him and the other guys on the board. They said, okay, we have a post-draft plan for all these guys, like how we think we can help them reach the outcomes we think they can get to, and they felt like he was the most coachable, well, in terms of like the work ethic, um, the way he responded to interviews, the way he approached being in the gym. Like he's a really good kid, but he's also like a very humble guy, and so I think he wants it badly, and he's also not going to sabotage the team like for the sake of him improving, but he's going to do all the work in the off season. So I wouldn't be surprised if like he comes back after this season and he's a much more improved, more polished offensive player. It doesn't mean he's going to average 20, but I think his work ethic is like his biggest skill set at this point. The effort. He doesn't really control his body well. He's still 19, very lanky dude. Like he'll do some goofy stuff. Like he had an alley oop dunk and then turned and hit and ran into Jalen Johnson, and like they both hit each other's heads. So it's like he he's still kind of figuring things out, like not just in terms of the NBA game, but like using his body and being in space. So, I'm still pretty optimistic for him. I trust that at least the Hawks understood it was a long term thing from everything I've heard.
Mhm.
So hopefully, like they'll be continue to be patient with him, and we have a pretty good developmental track record. So I just think the Hawks fans in general also need to be patient, just the way the organization is going to be. But uh, yeah, I think we're lucky that the class is bad because, or not bad, but like not as good as like 23 or 22. previous years. But I wanted to ask you too, just to finish off before I ask you some Bulls questions. I think there's a couple of teams that are in some pretty dire situations. We saw Phoenix traded for Nick Richards. That's not going to save their season. Like obviously, like
Yeah.
anyone's better than Mason Plumlee, but giving up draft capital for Nick Richards is probably not a good thing. So I want to give you a scale of like panic meters. So at 1, it's like okay, they'll be all right, and 10 is like yeah, it's over. Like there's no coming back. So I'll give you Phoenix first. Like where do you think they sit on that scale?
So Phoenix, honestly, I'm gonna go a 10. And the thing is, they do have like this current iteration of the team. I think is screwed. They're not gonna
Mhm.
accomplish anything. They do have a path out, which would be trading Booker, trading Durant, and trying to get any kind of assets. But I don't think they're gonna do that because of their new owner, because he's sunk so much money into
Yeah.
everything, and he's just made too big a splash. I feel like his priority is gonna be keeping this team an entertaining TV product and keeping people coming to the games for the next few years, and he's gonna do that despite them having no realistic shot at competing. And yeah, like I honestly love Nick Richards. I think he's awesome, but he's not going to do a single thing for this. Like he's not going to change their fate at all. And so yeah, if I was a Phoenix fan, I'd be so mad because I'd just be like, this is all for nothing. We're gonna lose. The only way we are saved is if we lose Devin Booker. And if I'm a Phoenix fan, I'm probably the biggest Devin Booker fan in the world. So yeah,
Right.
I think they're in dire straits.
Yeah, I kind of drank the Suns Kool-Aid, mainly because I thought Bud would come in and get them to fire up more threes. And like over the last couple seasons, when they got like above league average 3-point attempt rate, they were really good, just because they have great shooters, right? But I think I'm definitely underrated how bad Nurkic will be defensively, how much regression we would see from KD as a weak side rim protector, because they're really asking him to do too much. Like at 36, he shouldn't be the best rim protector and the best scorer and the best passer. And so, unfortunately, I do think they made their bet when they traded for Bradley Beal. So I think I'd be there with you. I think it's like a 8 or 9. I just think, relatively speaking, I think this next team is worse, and that would be the Warriors. Um, I think that I think that they may be in a worse situation. Um, I think they're like the first team to ever start 12-3 and then immediately go below 500 within the next 20 or so games. They might have blown this. Oh, they're 1 point away from blowing a 24-point lead to Minnesota tonight. Um, so if that happens, that'd be devastating. But I think Golden State might be in a worse situation. I think they tried to toe the line of developing and contending. After the punch, I just think that you probably should have punted on Draymond there, and I don't know, but like they try to keep Draymond. I think that messed up the chemistry, and then they have a team of like way too many guys who are dependent on Curry, and then Curry again is getting older. You can't trade a franchise icon like that. Draymond isn't. He's not nearly as valuable to other teams as he is to Golden State. I think they're in a tough situation. I think I put them like at 9.5. But where would you put them?
I'd probably I'd probably be at like I'll give it a 7. They're
Yeah.
always a team I've had trouble with. I kind of have caveman brain when it comes to them because I just look at the names on the roster and I'm like, I like so many of these guys, and
Yeah,
I still think Draymond is a really good defensive player, and
for
I
sure.
just think like if they didn't have him, I don't know how you could cobble up like a defense that's good enough to do anything in the playoffs. And
Mm.
like you said, like his value is it plummets when it's anywhere. Like you would have to find a very unique situation where he can replicate what he's doing in Golden State, offensively at least. But so then I look at Curry and I look at Draymond and I'm like, they haven't fallen off that much, and so these guys are still so good. I like Moses Moody. I like Trace Jackson Davis. I like Pajemski, even though he's terrible this season. I like so many guys.
Yeah,
So I always want to be optimistic about them, and like Buddy got off to that hot start. But yeah, right now it's just like how many years are we going on now for them where things are
yeah.
just not working? And so yeah, things are definitely rough. I would, yeah, I on you know what? I really hope that they're able to pull off LeBron somehow. I don't think I probably won't happen, but I just want to see it. And so yeah, I'm always going to be tricked by Steph Curry. I just think the world of him, and I think too much of him. But yeah, they are definitely in trouble because at some point, if the roster's not producing, these guys aren't as good as I thought they were.
Yeah. I think it is a really interesting roster. I like the Kyle Anderson pickup. I thought the Anthony Melton getting hurt is also like a bigger story than I think most people would have anticipated because he was really good for them defensively. Um, it's tough because I don't think they should make a trade to get better, and that's my kind of like I think Steve Kerr said something too. Like the worst thing to do right now is to make a big splash move,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, that's is that like a slight of the front office? Is it like him trying to play mind games? But I kind of agree with him. Like this team isn't is this team a Jimmy Butler away from contending? I don't think so. Um,
Probably
but
not based off who they would have to give up. I think
uh,
the only trades they could make would be like sacrificing their entire depth, and then you just become another Phoenix, and that's just not going to beat OKC. It's not going to beat Boston. It's not going to beat a lot of guys.
yeah, so that's kind of where I stand on them. I agree with you though. I do like a lot of those guys. So where would you be with the Sixers on that same scale?
Man, the Sixers like this season, it's definitely over. Going
Yeah,
forward, you know what? They're probably are they out as many picks as Phoenix is? Are they also do they have nothing in the pipeline going forward?
I don't think they have any. I think they have their 2031. I'm pretty sure they
Oh,
have their 20. I think they have more pick equity than they do. This, yeah, they have their first. Oh, they have their first in 26, 28. Yeah, they have their first 29 as well.
yeah, that's so tough. That I'll go an 8 for them. The only reason I'm not going to go 10 is just because of the existence of Joel Embiid. But if these injury issues just if we go into next year and it's still like this guy's not going to be healthy at all, then it's definitely a 10 because I feel like when he's just on the court by existing, he props this roster up by so much, and I
Yeah,
can deal with a diminished Paul George, and then I can count on like, oh, we got a big steal in Jared McCain. He was looking like a huge steal for them before the injury, and they have some guys that you can imagine being productive in a Joel Embiid ecosystem, but when he's not there, there's nothing. I'm not the biggest. I love Maxi again as like existing in there, but I'm not the biggest like. Is he the future savior? Like, is this
yeah,
gonna be
that's
a
where I'm at
guy
too.
who
Mhm.
yeah, I don't think he's ever gonna be like Trey Young running an offense where he's diming everyone up and scoring at a huge level, like carrying the entire thing. And so yeah, overall, and I've always been a big Paul George guy, but I think I probably finally have to be out. I think it's probably we're at the end, and so that's going to be a
Yep.
big issue because he's got years left on that contract. So now that I'm talking through it, we're probably at a 9.
Yeah, I think I'd be there with you too. There was a guy in my fantasy league who traded Anthony Edwards and Tyler Hero for Joel Embiid and Bub Carrington, and he's completely tanked this season. And at the time, we were like, man, that's a fleece. But I don't think we really realized how big of a fleece it would be, especially with the way that Tyler Hero was playing. But the injury stuff is so tough because I actually really like the roster. I think they did a really great job building around it. Be like Daryl Morey
hmm
he did a great job. Like Yabusele has been good. Kelly Oubre, he's tenable. Like you got a bunch of length, you got shooting, you got Kyle Lowry to give you some grit. Jared McCain came in and he was hooping. It's unfortunate because I think Embiid like came in, hurt himself on Christmas Day. He's been out and out of the lineup since. So I think I'd be around the same area with you. What about the Pelicans? And I think this is the same team. Like this season is done. But I guess like the next 2 to 3 years, do you think that? I guess it depends on like the draft outcome, but do you think that there's still something there with a Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum, Zion, DeJounte, or do you think like they need to start looking towards the future?
Yeah. So now that they've bottomed out so hard, I'm more optimistic because now I'm thinking Um, I think a lot about Zion right now in in comparison to Carl Anthony Towns. And so like Carl Anthony
Hmm.
Towns was the face of the Timberwolves, right? He was their number 1
Yep.
pick. He was supposed to be the savior of the franchise. He produced but we found out few years in, it's like that's not really the type of guy that this guy is. Then they luck into Anthony Edwards, and immediately everything recalibrates and it shifts to being
I
the
love where you're
Anthony
going with this.
Edwards.
It
Yeah,
makes so much sense. It makes so much sense. Keep going
yeah.
though. It
It
makes sense.
they become the Anthony Edwards franchise, and
Uh,
they go all in for Rudy Gobert, and so immediately the burden on Towns is lifted like completely. Like
yeah.
there's no one counting on him to be the locker room guy, to be the offensive savior, to be the defensive savior. He can just kind of exist, and when he's not the entire thing, then he's just a really good center who's like one of the best offensive centers in the entire league. And we saw they really took a leap. And so when I think about Zion, I am a huge ride or die Zion guy. I feel like
Yeah.
for the rest of my life, I won't be as in on a prospect as I was on Zion. And it hasn't gone the way I thought it would, and
Look.
even that is shocking because he was the most high motor guy
Oh yeah.
ever, like #1 pick ever, and now in
Yeah.
the NBA he just doesn't care and he doesn't play defense. It's a tragedy, but he's a guy who produces whenever he plays, but he's just not reliable enough durability wise and like off the court wise. We're learning
Mhm.
to be like the franchise player. But then when I think about like, let's say they land Cooper Flag, they get the #1 pick, and then this becomes the Cooper Flag team, and then we're thinking about Zion as Cooper Flag's sidekick, as just a
Mhm.
weapon around him. And then I look at the rest of the roster. It's like we have Herb Jones and Trey Murphy, two fantastic young wings. DeJounte and C.J. McCollum aren't as good as their names are still. But
Yeah.
when you're not relying on them, like when you're not relying on DeJounte the same way the Hawks were, and you're not relying on CJ the same way the Pelicans are, and they're just like your rotation guards. Those are still pretty good guys to have.
Mhm.
Although I don't know which are they both gonna still be around next year.
I think they're both on a contract for that long, but I don't know if they'll keep
Okay, and then they have Eve Misi has been one of the better rookies this year, and so that's interesting too. And so if they were to land one of these top picks, and then Cooper Flag lives up to the hype, I think they could be a really interesting rebound of a team. Brandon Ingram, I still feel like has to go, but I still don't know when or where that's going to be. They've been trying to unload him for forever, but it seems nobody wants him. So I'm pretty optimistic about this Pelicans team. So if they were to land, well, I don't know because I still have to do more work in the draft stuff. I'm behind. So I know Cooper Flag is going to be a savior. I think Dylan Harper will be a savior. I don't know if there's anyone else. Like I haven't locked into what's his name, Jockey Jonas or whatever
Onyeka
from
Okongwu.
Illinois.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
I don't think he's
or
savior
Palmy
level.
Boyles.
I don't think he's savior level. But he is like super talented. I really like his game. It's just more so my questions at least is that he doesn't like, for example, I think he has no layups made going to his right. Like he's a left hand pretty heavy guy. He has pretty high turnover percentage on his drives. He has insane pull up 3 point shooting numbers right now. Like, is that going to continue? So right now he's a very pull up three heavy scorer who also relies on pace and screens to get to the rack. But I don't know if he has if his efficiency is going to, like right now, if he's this efficient for the rest of his career, oh yeah, that's a primary ball handler. Like this is the guy I want running my offense. But if the pull up shooting falls off, I don't know if he has the athleticism or the strength. I think that has the strength, but I don't know if he has the athleticism to consistently get to his own spots without a screen. And I think that's the difference between being a savior. Like Dylan
Yeah.
Harper is a bully. Dylan Harper will blow off the 3 point line and he will finish through contact. He doesn't need a screen to create an advantage. And I think Kasparis definitely does right now. And regardless, he's a super talented kid. And I think I've read some interesting stuff about him. I've watched some things about him. I think he's gonna make some team happy. I just don't know how. I think like the drop off. Like right now, I do have Dylan Harper in this tier, but it's more so because I'm not haven't teased it out yet because I think I don't want to put Dylan in his own tier, and I don't want to put Dylan in Cooper Flag's tier. So it's kind of like he's just the next one down. So I think Dylan Harper could be interesting for this Pelicans team too, in terms of having an actual like downhill threat next to Zion. Like I don't know if that's what Cooper Flag will be, but I think Cooper Flag is still like for every team in the NBA they should consider him. They should take him #1. But I do think a team like the Pelicans could maybe be like, okay, well, do we want this guy instead? So I think it definitely makes sense. I love the comparison to the Timberwolves because Zion is still undeniably incredibly talented. And so it's just more so about can we get him in a better situation where he doesn't have to be the guy because reliability wise with his injuries or even his play style, stuff he's doing off the court, he hasn't proved he can be that guy. Want to ask you about two more teams because I feel like these teams are kind of under the radar. They're not as bad of a situation, but I think the Lakers, the Lakers are quietly overperforming a pretty bad net rating. They have a minus 1.9 net rating. That means their expected win-loss record over 82 games is just 36. They have the biggest differential between their net rating and their current record. So they have 3 wins above, and they've also been really bad against teams that are actually good, like teams that are above 500. I was really big on. I really like what I saw from JJ Redick, coaching wise. To start off the season, it hasn't looked as good, or it has as continuity wise or concise in terms of like the way that they're running their offense. It hasn't looked as good. I've been lower on the roster in general. Like I bet on their under for a reason. I didn't believe in them. I still don't really believe in them. I don't think it's a panic situation. It's just more so like, is this team worth building around? That's why I was like, when they traded for Dorian Finney-Smith, like he's a better basketball fit, but like I don't think that does anything. Like people were saying they're the 4th best team in the West now. I was like, no one should be scared of them. That's just kind of how I feel. Like obviously LeBron and AD in the playoff setting, you don't want to bet against them. But I think in terms of like really like quality teams in terms of depth and like I think there are teams that are leaps and heads ahead of them, at least in my opinion. So I think I'd put them in like a 6-ish, just because I mean right now they're competitive, but like if LeBron leaves, who is the next guy to take the reins? Is it Dalton Connect? Like Austin Reeves? Like I'm not exactly moved by that. So I guess like where do you stand on the Lakers in terms of like their outlook?
Yeah, I'm probably in the same place as far as them being like making any kind of noise this year. I do have a little bit of caveman brain with them too, like the same way as the Warriors, where I'm like you said, oh, LeBron and Anthony Davis in the playoffs could get frisky, but it's just not going to happen. And I love Austin Reeves, and I like a lot of the role players, but this is a team like when I look at the roster, I have to remind myself how talented the NBA is today because like 10 years ago, this is like a surefire contender. Like the Bulls were going into the
Oh
conference
yeah,
finals with Keith Bogans at the 2. And so when I think about like this Lakers team, I'm like, that's a super team. But in today's NBA, it's just not going to cut it. And so, yeah, I feel like they're they're kind of in the sun spot where I don't
really.
think they're gonna blow it up. Like I don't think unless maybe if LeBron leaves, maybe then they go in and trade away Anthony Davis. But I still feel like they'll try and just maintain the Lakers winning ways and just try and keep people in seats and watching on TV and stuff. But yeah, in general, I think it's we're probably not going to see another conference finals in this LeBron era, and after once he leaves, it's going to be a really long time unless they're able to pull off something crazy because they're another team that's out of picks, right? They've got 2031.
Yeah. The other team I'm kind of think is a little bit in a worse situation than most people might. Not in the worst situation, but just more so like right now they're not playing up to their standard. I think it's the Celtics. They've kind of been inconsistent. Had a bad loss tonight against the Raptors. This is still the defending champ. So like by no means are these guys. I don't know if like the regular season is as predictive for a team like this. Like we've seen them they look like in the playoffs. But I think, another year of Al Horford on Al Horford's knees has been detrimental. Kristaps hasn't been healthy. Neemias Queta is not an NBA player. Luke Cornett minutes haven't been great. Like I like Queta a lot. I just don't think he's like I don't know if I want to play him in the playoffs. Like I don't want to play him if I
Yeah.
don't have to. But he's okay. Like he's serviceable, but it's like not to go too much about Neemias Queta. But I think the other thing is too like quietly Jaylen Brown has not had a great season, and he's currently shooting his worst percentage from the 3-point line right now. He's at I think 30. He's at 31.9%. He's for the first time in his career, he has a below average relative true shooting percentage. So he's 2 points below league average right now. He's been one of the worst spot up players in the league. Like has not been up to his standard, and I think that like that's part of the factor in terms of the way that they've been like have some issues. And I think I've also seen some stats where like when his usage goes up, the Celtics record is dropping, and I don't know. I have some questions about them. You also saw the whole anomaly thing where people are calling Jason Tatum the anomaly, and then As of late, he has been anything but that. Like he's been pretty bad. So I don't think the Celtics are by any means like, do I say they're not going to be a contender or they're not going to win the finals? But it's just more so I think that there is a bit of a championship hangover for teams. We haven't seen the team repeat as a champion in what, 6 years or 7 years, and that's some of that is about how good, like you mentioned, the NBA is today. But it's just really hard to repeat, and I think for a team that like Kristaps had to get healthy at the perfect time for them to win that championship. And I think you're making bets. They didn't add more big man depth. I thought they could have maybe took Filipowski. Obviously he's not a huge benefit, but I think like running it back with Al Horford and Porzingis as your bigs was risky. And I think they probably might want to see if they can find some insurance. But I guess like what are your thoughts on the Celtics right now with them being a little bit up and down? I think they're 5-5 in the last 10 or something like that.
Yeah, that's what. So are the KD Warriors? Or that's the last team to
That's the last
repeat?
team that repeated. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's crazy. Um, the the Celtics. Honestly, I would go pretty low. I would go like a 2 maybe. Just because I think the roster is just too talented. The big man. I was concerned about the big man rotation last year, but it didn't seem to matter. And like Al Horford was switching on to Luca in the finals, and I was like, "How
Yeah.
is this allowed? How is this happening?" And so yeah, he seems to defy all age and odds, and so yeah, the I could definitely see if they do lose, and it is the downfall of the big rotation. I think that'll definitely make sense, but um, just overall this roster, I just still feel like it's too much. They just have too many guys who could shoot, pass, and dribble, and when they're winning the 3-point battle, it still feels insurmountable to me, and it also like I suppose. How do you think they're it probably is better competition in the East this year than they faced last year, right? Like just by
Yeah.
virtue of the Cavs
I
and
don't
the
think there was
Knicks.
any team on the Cavs level last year.
Yeah, the Pacers like at their peak were good, but Halliburton was too. He wasn't. He was like a shell of himself in the
He
playoffs.
was
So
he was a fake psyop that was created by Adam Silver to drive ratings. That is not the same player that we saw for that he never existed. Like it's a figment of your imagination.
he's
Um,
good right
I,
now.
I mean he's all right. Like I think honestly the Pacers are playing good basketball. Again, like that's not a team that I watch a lot. It's not because I hate Halliburton. I don't really enjoy. I don't know. I like that style of basketball, but I also don't. I'm not a big Matherin guy. I want them to play Jarris Walker, so until they play Jarris Walker, I won't watch. But yeah, he's played better basketball. But I don't think like he was never in those point guard combos that people were putting him in. That's just kind of how I felt. So I felt a little bit vindicated this season. But I definitely agree. Like the East is better in terms of the top of the teams, but I also think Boston is still like Cleveland right now is playing so incredibly good, and we've seen such a huge leap from both Garland. Well, Garland's just healthy again, and he's being incredibly efficient, but Mobley in particular has taken a huge step that I think would make them a really, really tough matchup for Boston. And I think their presence is also what makes me like, okay, well, if Boston isn't consistent right now, can they put it together in time to address this Avengers level threat? Because like this is a big, they're knocking on your door. I think. I guess like Cleveland's fifth guy isn't as good as Boston's fifth guy, and then Boston has been in so many playoff battles. Like the experiences, like I saw a clip of Jason Tatum as a rookie because the whole like Brandon Knight thing where Brandon Knight was saying he's soft, and the last
Oh,
game that
Brandon
Brandon Knight played,
Jennings.
Brandon Jennings. The last game Brandon Jennings played was that game 7 where Jason Tatum and Celtics closed out Milwaukee. And I was like, he's been in the league when Jabari Parker was on the Bucks. Terry Rozier, like I almost forgot like how old Tatum is and how much playoff experience. Like he's an old man by playoff game standards. So I think this team
Jabari
continuity
was
is
probably
everything.
still a franchise player back then too.
Yes, like this is baby Giannis. Like this is with Eric Bledsoe still killing the spacing, and Ersan Ilyasova was on the court. I'm like, wow, John Henson was still on the roster. Like this was a completely different NBA. So I do think the continuity of the experience, the fact that these guys have been there before, they're still like my favorite for contenders and wise. But I think also people kind of expected the West to be better, like as a conference holistically. But I think the East kind of is right there with them. But yeah, I think I definitely would agree with in terms of like overall opinion level. But I just have some questions about them, especially with the way Jaylen Brown has played. So I do want to finish
Yeah.
with this
Well,
one like
wait,
kind of go ahead. Yep.
one more thought. When it comes down to them versus the Cavs and versus the Knicks, I really boil it down. And we talked a little bit about this concept with you when you were on the State of the League. When I look at it like, um, uh, teams that have guys you can ignore on offense, or ignore on defense and attack on offense. I just feel like the Celtics have so few weaknesses, and the Cavs, like, Darius Garland is a pressure point. Donovan Mitchell, even though he's like super athletic and can play defense when he locks in, he's still small, and that's a little bit of a pressure point. And if the two big lineup, like if Evan Mobley's not shooting well, is that a guy you can ignore on the perimeter? Although he has done a lot of great stuff attacking off closeouts, but still. And then like the Knicks, like Jalen Brunson, I feel like is you can attack that, and Karl Towns has been pretty like
Yep.
susceptible as a rim protector, and so I feel like just by virtue of being less attackable, although maybe this is the year Al Horford becomes that weakness. We'll see, but yeah, that would be why I have the most confidence in them.
No, that's a very good point. And I think in the game they played earlier this season, like Garland was huge. Like he was really good in those switching scenarios. But yeah, I don't know. It's Boston feels unstoppable at sometimes, and I think the only Achilles heel is okay. Well, is Jalen Brown regressing as a scorer? I don't really necessarily think so. He's just in a cold stretch. Like we have a long sample size of him being a better shooter. I agree. It's like comes down to the bigs. I want to finish by asking you just like a less serious question, but I guess like would you from just pure entertainment value because I know like the Bulls have been like a we know what they are. Would you prefer like a Jimmy Butler type of trade scenario where you get all like these funny sound bites like drama, chaos among the team, or do you enjoy like the more laid back like Zach Nance has been in trade rumors, Vucevic like they just go out there and hoop. I guess like what would you prefer as like a just from an entertainment perspective?
Absolutely. I want it to be as messy as possible. I want Zach Levine throwing all kinds of temper tantrums. Jimmy Butler was kind of did the same things he's doing now back when he was on the Bulls. He like was changing in a separate locker room. He took a separate plane to a game, and so he was causing that drama back then too. But and Zach Levine, maybe if he caused a little drama, he would be out of here by now. But instead, he's got to be Mr. Professional, put my head down and grind it out.
Yeah,
But yeah, and I wish, because anything to force a move, because the GM is not going to do it on his own. He's only going to do it if there's public pressure. I think the only reason we got the last front office fired was because of public pressure, was because All-Star Weekend was in Chicago, and there was like a billboard, and on First Take the crowd like broke out in a chant. They were like fire Garpax or whatever. And so the only way that there's any change is when there's like public pressure and momentum, but there's just not, because this team is so irrelevant, and the guys are just they're all too all too mellow professionals. So I wish Zach Levine would throw a tantrum. I wish he would sit out games and say, "Get me to L.A." or something like that. That would be my dream.
I actually do want to ask you one more thing now. Do you think like at what point do you think people realize that Jimmy Butler is consistently doing the same thing across every team? Like arguably you could say Miami hasn't done great by him. Like I know he understands he wants his own contract, whatever it may be.
Mhm.
But this is not what his fifth or sixth time doing something like this. So I guess like what do you
It
think
is
it like
it
what do you
is
think the
every
disconnect
stop.
is? Like
Yeah,
it's been
he's
every team.
it's very interesting, because when he is happy, he is a great guy to have on your team, because he's a great player. When he's happy, he gets along with everyone. Everyone loves him. But then once he makes up his mind and wants to go out, it's just drama. And so the first iteration of the Bulls was when he first emerged as like a really good player, when he started averaging 20 points per game. Then Derrick Rose comes back, and it's like Jimmy Butler and the old guard of the Bulls, like Joakim Noah and Derrick Rose and those guys, but they're not the same guys they were. And there was like a big internal power shift, because everyone on the Bulls roster was like, well, this is still Derrick Rose's team. This is still MVP Derrick Rose, but he was not producing at that level. And then so I think that caused a lot of friction. And also, Joakim Noah was Jimmy Butler's like best friend on the team for a while, but then I think Joakim, as the injuries wore him down, he became like less locked in, and he would practice less because he was so physically worn
Mm.
down. And Jimmy got super mad about that, and so it really has always stemmed with hard work from him. He's like the ultimate hustle grind set type guy. Like he wasn't supposed to be an all-star level player. Like nobody anticipated that from him. He's not a guy with a lot of standout physical traits. He was an older college player. Like when they drafted him, I think it was very much just in like a 2010 meta. Like, can this guy be our Ronnie Brewer replacement? Just a guy who can defend well and not do anything on the offensive end. But
Yeah.
he ends up turning himself into this awesome player. And so, by hard work, like the stories came out, like he went to a cabin in the woods with no TV, no internet, and he just locked in and grinded, and that's how he became a great player. And so, it's all for the entire time. It's been like anyone not working hard, Jimmy hates you, and he's going to resist against you. And so, in the second iteration of the Bulls, once he got everyone else, and it became the Jimmy Butler team, that's when we do the three alphas. We bring in Wade and Rondo, and then we have a bunch of young guys. Denzel Valentine, Doug McDermott, Bobby Portis, like those types of guys. And Jimmy caused issues there because he basically went to the media and he was like, the young guys aren't working hard enough. This sucks. Him and Dwayne Wade like teamed up. They're like, they're not working hard enough, which Dwayne Wade was asleep at the wheel for his entire Bulls tenure. So it was so ironic. But which in reality, I don't think the guys weren't working hard. I think they just sucked. But Jimmy Butler's like, hey, I used to suck too, so you should just work hard to become an all-star. And
Right.
that caused issues. And you probably remember Rondo, like, he put out an Instagram picture of his Boston Celtics days. He's like, my vets back then would never call out the young guys to the media. And so that was the big issue. Then he goes to Minnesota. I think it's a hard work thing too. I think he was like, Wiggins doesn't work hard, Towns doesn't work hard. And they're viewed as the franchise players. I hate this. I'm out of here. Goes to Philadelphia. Ben Simmons doesn't work hard. Brett Brown isn't. Well, I guess he was primarily mad about Tobias Harris being paid, which is valid. But still, he kind of like blew it up at the end. And
Tobias Harris over me.
Yeah.
I love that kid.
And so I think by the end, I guess he hated everyone except Embiid. So yeah, then he blows his way out of there, and then. Yeah, everything has been great in Miami. Him and Tyler Hero were best friends up until recently, I guess, and now everyone seems to be happy that he's gone. So this is a guy who, it just seems he wears out his welcome. Once he sets his mind to being gone, he's gone. And the tough thing about this situation is like, well, is it even tough? I mean, straight up, no one's gonna give him that money. So I don't really know. I don't know what the end goal is.
Yeah, I think that was a great summary of. I never thought about that, like what frustrates him so much. Like, and I get it though. Like, this is someone who's famously was homeless, grinded at Marquette. Like he is the physical manifestation of grind. Said you could do anything you set your mind to, and when you get that way, I think Kobe had the same issue. I think MJ, obviously these different types of guys, but they had that mindset that like there's no reason you should suck. And as an NBA player, he also has the unfortunate sort of like track record of pairing up with guys who just don't care. Like Ben Simmons does not care about basketball. It sucks because again, like this is a dude who's supposed to be who came in. There's no reason he shouldn't have been great. Like he had everything available to him, and so I can understand some of that. Same thing with Wiggins. Same thing with Zion to some extent as well. Like I can understand it's almost probably some jealousy for him too. It's like if I had what you had, you know what I would be, and I think that it all goes back to that. Like he detests the idea of wasting potential. Which I can respect, but I think it should be more like a constructive thing, like help them be better, as opposed to like, I hate you. I'm going to leave you alone, and you're going to never be anything because you don't respect the way I work. If he had a slightly different mindset, we could have had some great teams.
And what's crazy, I even forgot the last element of this, is that he lands in Miami. It's the ultimate hustle grind set culture place. Like we're the body fat boot camp testing team.
Oh yeah.
Everyone's in peak shape. It's great. And then out of nowhere, Jimmy's the guy who's seemingly his work ethic has slipped. Like last year, do you remember he like called out sick for a game and then he was spotted at a tennis match with Neymar? It's like, what are you doing? And then he's doing like his big head coffee stuff off the court. And then Pat Riley's black. Oh, maybe that is. Yeah, so I guess it all stems from Pat Riley's exit conference or press conference last year, where he's like, "I like
Yeah,
guys
because
who
he was
play."
talking mess, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe
Sure.
Jimmy is like, this is the first time he's been the one blasted for his work ethic, like not grinding and not going hard enough. So maybe that's where it all comes from. But yeah, he's a very interesting guy. But yeah, he's gotten results in Miami, like 2 finals out of 4 or 5 years or whatever. But yeah, it's just the no one's gonna pay him that money going forward. If they didn't pay Dwayne Wade that when he was past his prime, they're not gonna pay you. So
His legacy will be interesting. I do wonder how people will view him, not just in terms of like his basketball accomplishments, but how he'll be remembered. Because I think he, I mean, you can't deny that, like you said, like he got results from like scraps, like that. Those Miami Heat teams didn't deserve to be in the finals. Um, it will be very interesting to see where he ends up. I have no idea. I couldn't even give you a team. I couldn't even give you a list of teams that I think would do it. I think like Phoenix is kind of off the table. I don't think it happens. But yeah, appreciate you so much, Pablo. Let the people know they can find you. We know TikTok may be gone, but where can they find you?
if TikTok is still around, look up Pablo Escobar. If not, I'm at the State of the League podcast on YouTube, Patreon, Spotify, Apple. We post every Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then outside of that, we'll see. Maybe I'll get on the Chinese app, Zhonghao Shu or whatever. Yeah, but I'm optimistic. I'm still optimistic that there's going to be
Me
some
too.
kind of extension that it won't go away on the 19th. But we'll see. I'm hoping for fingers crossed decision tomorrow.
For sure. I appreciate you again, Pablo. I wouldn't say this to any other guest, but I hope all your franchise players get traded and you get what you like, what you've been praying for. To everyone who's watching, please, ask us any questions you have. Follow Pablo on all his platforms. Tap in with the State of League podcast, and then I'll see you guys after. I think we play the Celtics, so I'll see you after that. But y'all be safe.